Welcome to the Gospel According to Star Trek podcast. I'm Kevin C. Neese.
And I'm Tim Van Orden, and this is episode 7, The Search for Saru. We'll be starting off with some Star Trek news about Star Trek Online, Star Trek film musings / news, and more Star Trek tech in real life. Try saying that 3 times fast. And then we'll be discussing Lower Decks, Season 1, Episode 9, Crisis Point.
That's a lot of stuff, and then we're going to get right into our audience question right after our main story, which is, of course, that dive into Saru and what he means to Star Trek Discovery and all of us. Won't you please join us?
And this better be a good one, because my wife said she was looking forward to it.
Well, you know, if Beth is looking forward to it, we've got to be on our A game. That's setting the bar. It's
well.
How are you, Tim?
I'm just taking a drink of water out of my water bottle.
That's awesome.
Doing well, thanks. How are you?
I'm doing okay. I thought maybe we'd move beyond water bottles. It's the 24th century. We got to have some better technology by now.
It's not the 24th century.
Hey, it's Star Trek, man.
All right. Are we getting into the Star Trek tech in real life first?
We can, if you want to.
I mean, you've kind of inadvertently segued us into that.
I have inadvertently segued into our first bit of Star Trek news. Hi, everybody. Welcome. So the first bit of Star Trek news, this is kind of one of those weird things that, who knows if it's a thing, right? This is a thing that's going to be on Kickstarter. It's not even on Kickstarter yet. That's how new it is. It's like, we're going to have a Kickstarter. So who knows how, feasible the technology is or whatever, but it's this thing called Milo, link in the description. Hashtag not spawn. This thing called Milo that is a communicator that is voice activated. Because we've had the thing before. You remember the fundraiser a while back for a thing called the Com Badge? Did you see that?
I did not. No, I missed it.
So it's basically based on the TNG communicator concept, right?
Okay.
But it's like Bluetooth or Wi-Fi or whatever. This thing, Milo, purports to not need Bluetooth, to not need Wi-Fi. And I mean, maybe it's, I don't know, maybe it runs like a walkie-talkie, but you have a group of people who are all connected on this, and you don't need Wi-Fi, and you can do over long distances, and it's voice activated. So I guess you say okay, Milo, or whatever, and then you talk to your friend, and you can click on your sleeve or on your shirt or whatever.
So it's like a wearable Alexa?
Except it's a communication device.
Okay.
You can talk to other people just the same way you would in Star Trek, but you don't have to press a button. The Com Badge or whatever, you'd have to press a button. This you don't even have to. It's just like in TNG, Michael Kuda was talking about this always listening software stuff before Alexa even existed. Mm-hmm. It listens for keywords and phrases and knows that you're wanting to talk to somebody. That's how you can say Riker to Picard without tapping your Com Badge. You can tap your Com Badge just to be sure it hears you, but you don't have to do it. So, and at the time that was in the Star Trek Next Generation Technical Manual, that might have seemed a little like a retcon for actors forgetting to tap their badges. But now we have that kind of technology in their real life. And I've been in people's homes who have Alexa and accidentally set it off by saying something that sounds like Alexa. And then Alexa's like, playing. And then, some song title that sounds like what I just said, that who knew that song ever existed. It's like, playing Socks on Fire by, whatever. And it's like, no, Alexa, shut up.
There was a video a while back of someone who had changed the wake up command on Alexa to computer.
Oh, right. Yeah, you can do that.
They were watching Voyager or something, and Janeway turned it on.
That's awesome. Well, anyway, apparently the Milo thing is a communicator, like in Star Trek.
All right.
So we'll see. We'll see what that happens. So yeah. Okay, your turn. What have you got? Star Trek.
Just a little bit of news about Star Trek Online. Apparently, and I haven't played in a while, so yeah. I'm not entirely sure on what all this entails. All I know is that they are introducing experimental upgrades that can allow you to kind of customize your ship a little bit, and you can get a free token to do that if you log in between October 6th through November 5th. So I just wanted to throw a heads out there in case any of our listeners are actually playing Star Trek Online, to make sure you log in between October 6th of 2020 and November 5th of 2020 for your free token.
And again, hashtag not Spawn.
Right.
Um,
Not Spawn.
not Spawn. It means not sponsored.
Not
Like it's not a
sponsored. Okay, I
sponsorship.
was like, Spawn the
Sorry,
comic. What does
it's
he
the
have to do with
no
any of this?
SPON
I
Spawn.
am not up to date
Hashtag
with the hip
man.
lingo, dude.
You gotta get with the YouTube kids, man.
Yeah, and you should like. I just today I learned about a different kind of fan fiction. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Oh boy, I tell you, there's
So
all kinds of
so
stuff out there.
what else was your other piece of news?
Oh boy, you're a beautiful man.
Careful, we might end up in some
Nobody.
fiction.
Oh gosh. So the other thing is, what was the other thing? Oh yeah. So I was thinking about, all right, so last week we had as our story, right, that the Star Trek movies are not happening at Paramount anymore, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I then found, and I think that story was actually on from like September 21st. I found another story that's like from September 25th, and this is on Trek Movie. And so who knows like how far in advance the people on Giant Freaking Robot got the word or whatever. But Noah Hawley was the guy who was going to do Star Trek 4, and I just found it interesting. It's not exactly like news exactly, but he did talk about what he envisioned for this next Star Trek movie. And I said last time that all of the things that I'd heard made me cringe, and what I'd actually heard was an untrue version of what he was or I guess I drew a conclusion, like I jumped to a conclusion. I thought he was wanting to recast Kirk and Spock and McCoy and everybody. Actually, he wanted a whole new crew. He was like, I want to start like a whole new crew in the movies, which is super ambitious. But and he says start from scratch with a new crew of characters, which I think is ambitious and an interesting idea. But he also said that he wanted to go for essentially a Star Trek, it says, that isn't all action, or I guess that is more intellectual or more peaceful. What are you snickering at?
Well, I mean, I don't know. Well, continue your line of thought.
Okay,
I'll see if it's relevant.
Okay, all right. So, and he was saying like that his favorite moment in Star Trek is in Star Trek 2 when Kirk puts on his reading glasses to look at the console to punch in the code to take down Khan's shields. He's like, he likes that because it's this image of this kind of bookish image of the captain, doing this basically nerdy thing, to get them out of this crisis. That it's not all, I mean, of course it does lead to them, firing on Khan's ship, but the idea is that he's thinking his way out of the situation and not just shooting. I mean, he does shoot his way out, but
yeah.
but I like the spirit of that, and I was kind of like, oh, I mean, much as I think the Kelvin Timelines films are not given the credit they're due for how much character story and philosophy and in my case, frankly, theology is in them, right? I think they're right up there with some of the best Star Trek films ever made, except for Into Darkness. I always add that caveat because Into Darkness is terrible, but as much as that, I still get that it's cool. Like I was watching that First Frontier film, and they were using all James Horner music in that film, and I was watching it, and I wasn't necessarily thinking of something that would have that kind of look because they're definitely going for an original series look. But I thought there's probably room in the world for a Star Trek movie that would have this kind of pacing and this kind of music that would take us back to more of a kind of a classic movie angle than what we've had in the Kelvin timeline, and that would be kind of cool. I think that would be fun to make a movie like that again. So anyway, just kind of thought that was cool, and I kind of think he showed a lot of enthusiasm for the project, even though it was kind of delayed at the time that he did the interview. He showed a lot of enthusiasm for it, and I kind of hope he gets to make some version of his Star Trek at some point. I think it's pretty cool.
Yeah, as long as it's not yet another reboot, I'm fine with it.
Right. Well, I mean, every iteration of Star Trek is in some senses a kind of a reboot or a reimagining. even the series that are contiguous, like Next Generation, Deep Space Nine, and Voyager, each one has its own take on what Star Trek can be in terms of the characters and the location and the challenges and the style. So,
that's fair. I don't need another dramatic change.
like another AU.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I've already got a little kink in my neck. I don't need more whiplash to go on top of that.
I understand that. So anyway, that's that. That's where I'm at.
Okay.
Do you have another piece of Star Trek news, or is that
Nope. Just the Star Trek Online token.
That's cool.
Thing.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
All right. Well, yeah. Well, actually, speaking of the classic Star Trek movies, the original crew movies, I think that leads us right into.
Doesn't it though?
Doesn't it? It does. I didn't even plan that, but this week's episode of Lower Decks, Crisis Point, definitely called back to the classic movies. What did you think about it?
It was quite the homage. I actually enjoyed this episode.
Yeah, I did too. I would go ahead.
I was just going to say a lot of what I enjoyed, and I think, was the nostalgia factor. Mm-hmm. So I feel like the appeal to the episode is going to have a limited audience.
Possibly, yeah. At least a limited audience that gets a lot of the jokes. But I mean, that's always true because it's always filled with all kinds of nerdy, tricky jokes.
Yeah, well, I feel like this one, like sometimes their humor is, like situational. Like the guy, it's a koala on, and all that jazz. Uh-huh. But this one was like the humor in this one was almost entirely self-referential.
Yeah, a lot of it was. Yeah, you're right. And I mean, but it was so good, and it was so well done. It was so funny. This was honestly my favorite episode so far.
Yeah, mine too.
I just don't know how you can get better than this. Not just
and the music was on point.
And it's funny because I have been listening to Star Trek 2 and 3 a lot lately. That's kind of one of my working things. I listen to Star Trek 2 and 3 a lot when I work, and they uses some of those flourishes that James Horner used in there. They actually take the Lower Decks theme and Horner it up,
Mm-hmm. Yep.
and it's really exciting. It's really cool and really well done. And then there's that great like fly into the Cerritos and the shuttlecraft.
Yes. Oh yeah.
I love that. I love how, like, by the end of it is just spinning around. It's gorgeous. I love that. And then of course when you get in, they got the lights in your face like Abrams with the lens flares and stuff, and it's just great. There's so many callbacks to the movies that I can't get over it. And the lighting, they use lighting with like more shadows and stuff for the characters.
And my wife pointed this out. Did you notice when they were in, quote unquote, in the movie, you got the little letterbox effect?
Yes. That was very cool. Yeah, I loved it. It was fantastic. But I mean, not just for that, but I actually enjoyed the story too.
Yeah. I mean, I'll be honest. At the start of the episode, I thought it was just going to be another Mariner goes bonkers and yells and screams a whole lot episode. So I kind of wasn't looking forward to it, but then got into it, and I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, I agree.
The story on top of it was good. I wasn't expecting her to encounter herself, and I wasn't expecting the dialogue that they had, the exchange. Mm-hmm, so that was well done.
I love what she said about just doing the hard thing and being a good Starfleet officer. Mm-hmm. That's what's really the tough thing to do. That's what's really the cool thing to do. And I like that a lot. I like that a lot. And that actually kind of relates to Cobra Kai. I don't know if you've been watching that.
Oh my gosh. That's what I was watching before I watched before I watched Lower Decks tonight. Yeah.
Oh, Cobra Kai is so great.
It's so good. I'm not all the way through it, so
okay,
careful on the spoilers.
That's kind of where Johnny Lawrence. Where are you? What season are you in?
I'm in the middle of the second season.
Okay, so Johnny Lawrence, I think he's probably kind of in that transition right now, where he's kind of learning that it's not cool to be without honor.
Right.
Mm-hmm. And that That's cool. Like, yeah, I like that. He's sort of trying to redefine what's cool for his students. And it's the
Mhm.
same kind of thing with Mariner, where she's kind of like, you know what, being rebellious feels cool, but it actually takes a whole lot more guts to.
In the words of one of my favorite bands, it's hip to be square.
Oh, now you're just gonna get me off on Back to the Future, and then we're gonna have fun. Yeah, I mean, exactly, and I love that, and I love that. For me, the big, like, if I'm going to take away something serious from this episode, okay,
Mhm.
the big takeaway for me was that this was therapeutic for
Mhm.
Mariner.
Yeah, my
And
wife said she would love to have a holodeck for therapy.
oh yeah, no kidding. I mean, that's wonderful. And I just want to say that, I mean, if I could just make a PSA out of it, Mariner's right. Therapy works.
Oh,
Um,
absolutely.
uh,
Yeah.
it helps, and you should do it. Whoever you are, if you're struggling with mental health issues, you should treat those as seriously as you treat physical health issues. And yeah, it does help to work through it. And like Mariner said, it may feel like the tougher thing to do, to like go it on your own and not go and get
Mhm.
mushy in somebody's office about your feelings.
Right.
But that's actually not true. That's a lie you tell yourself, just like the lie Mariner tells herself in the episode. The truth is that doing the harder thing, which is going in and getting mushy in somebody's office and talking
Mhm.
about your feelings, like, that is actually the tougher thing to do.
And you know,
That's the bigger challenge.
it's not just for mental health either. I mean, not just for like mental health issues. Like
Mental
I feel like
illness.
mental illness. Thank you. That's
Yeah,
the
yeah,
word I'm
yeah,
looking
yeah.
for.
Right.
A lot of people, I think, would benefit from just being able to have someone to listen and
Mm-hmm.
talk things through,
Mm-hmm.
which I think is kind of one of the best parts about TNG is that they recognize just having a counselor on board to just help people, to just listen and let them talk things through
Mm-hmm.
is a fantastic element. I really appreciated that.
I completely agree, and I think that's looked back on now with some disdain. Like, oh, that's kind of a hallmark of the '80s, because the '80s was all about therapy culture and all that stuff, and like
Mhm.
that's just shows that it's an '80s show. Nope, nope, it doesn't. I think that's very truthful and very good and very real, especially when we're in the age of PTSD, if you will.
Mhm.
I mean, I hate to say that, but it feels that way. Like, the awareness of that has grown so much, and we see so many people in our culture who suffer from that. I
Mhm.
mean, that's just one way in which people in Starfleet are going to need somebody to counsel them and work with them. And that's why it's great to have Ezri later on in Deep Space Nine.
Mhm. Yes, good point. I'd almost forgotten about her.
And let's not forget, too, from a Christian perspective, you can go to your Christian counselor, you can go to your psychotherapist, you can go wherever feels comfortable to you, wherever feels safe to you, wherever works for you.
Mhm.
Don't be afraid to say, I've got the wrong therapist, I need to find the right person. Don't be afraid to do the work to find the right person who's going to help you. But the other side of that is, don't forget that whether they take a psychotherapeutic angle or whether they take a biblical, where they pull out a Bible and pray with you or what, it
Mhm.
doesn't matter. That's soul care, and soul care is a good thing. And you need it, and it's I really believe, I mean, it's pastoral shepherding type work that's being done, and it's good. We all need it. Everybody needs it to one degree or another. And so yeah, take care of yourself. And that's the wrong way to put it. Take care of yourself by letting others help you take care
Yeah,
of
there you
yourself.
go.
You know what I mean? You got to reach
Mhm.
out. You can't be all like an island. So there you go. Thank you, Mariner.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, great episode. Absolutely great. Loved it. Don't know how they can top it with the season closer next week. Um, we'll see.
Well, in the trailer,
I didn't see the trailer because I thought the trailer said next season.
no, it was next episode on
Oh,
the season
really? See,
finale.
I usually actually kind of watch the trailers. But
Really? Oh,
on
okay.
this one, I was like, I'm not sure I want to do that. I liked this one enough that I'm like,
It did feel like a good closing episode for a season.
It really did. It really felt like, especially with their signatures at the end, which was wonderful.
Yeah, it was
I
a
love
nice
that.
touch.
Oh, and I actually loved Tendy's thing in this episode. Well, I loved Rutherford too. There's so many things to talk about in this episode, but Tendy, and the whole Orion slave girl thing, and being like, "Hey, Mariner, this is not cool," and just saying, not only is this not cool for how you're treating me and my culture, first of all, but also you're not the kind of person who's this violent and this crazy and this obsessed. And you don't mistreat people like this, not at your best. This isn't you. And she storms out, and I love that. I absolutely love that. I was so proud of Tindy in this episode, and I was proud too of the way they reconciled at the end of the episode, which in Lower Decks fashion was very brief, but I think it showed that the only thing it takes to apologize for something is just to apologize, and I mean sincerely, and really say, hey, I screwed up, that was the wrong thing to do, I'm really sorry, can you forgive me? And the only thing it takes to forgive somebody is to really just forgive them. And anytime we're holding on to that and not apologizing for something we've done wrong, and anytime we're holding on to something and not forgiving other people for things that they've done to us, that's really just hanging on to control, that's really just acting out of fear. And it changes your whole life when you just let go and just say, you know what, I'm going to own it when I make mistakes, and I'm going to forgive people when they make mistakes and own up to theirs. And it makes such a difference. And I thought that was a beautiful picture of it at the end of that episode. So there you go.
There's I hope we could do episodes about forgiveness, but
yes,
but yeah, it was good.
Yep, it was very good. And we can talk a little bit about Boimler too, but I think anyway.
I did like we're about out of time.
Yeah,
we've allocated for Lower Decks, but I did want to say that I loved the character that she wrote for Boimler, and the gag there. Yeah, that's pretty close.
Yep, that was really funny. That was really great. But I felt bad for Boimler at the end because he was like,
he tried so hard to prepare.
And then, didn't prepare. And part of that you can see is kind of a fallout of Mariner sort of being herself and taking over a thing, which again, the opening of the episode, she was kind of being herself and taking over a thing and acting brashly when she shouldn't. But then also, it's the fact that Boimler was trying to prepare by trying to figure out who Freeman wanted him to be. And how Freeman wanted him to think and how Freeman wants him to act. Like, he wants to be such a perfect Starfleet officer, but he wants to do it by crossing the T's and dotting the I's that somebody else sets up for him in just the way they tell him to. And that's not what anybody wants. They don't want somebody who's so obsequious that they don't have a self. Like, okay, I can think about what I might want, but what are you going to bring that's maybe different or better than what I want? What are you gonna bring that's you? And anyway, and that's I think all of us have been like, going for a new job or something, and you'll say anything. But I learned a long time ago that I needed to quit lying about myself to try to impress people, because nobody was ever impressed with the lies I told about myself. They're always impressed with the truth I tell. And
if they are impressed with the lie, they're not going to be impressed when they find out what the truth is.
Right. Exactly. And I'm at the end of the day, I am who I am. And if they don't like who I am, then you know what? They're not the people I need to be working with or working for, or this isn't the venture I need to be going into, because we just need to be honest about who we are. And if we don't fit somewhere, well, that's okay. That means this is not the place for you. And isn't it better to find out at the beginning than to have it just unspool on you because you lied to get in? So, yep.
So enjoy that extra 5 minutes of Lower Decks conversation.
Right, exactly, man.
So Saru,
woo! Need a breather after all that, man. There were so many life lessons in Lower Decks this week.
Would you say that it earned the first 2 words in the title today?
It did. It absolutely did. Yeah, it was great. I really enjoyed this episode. It was everything. It's like everything the series could be all in one episode. And it's like, man, I don't know if you can do better after this, but we'll see. But yeah, so on to our main story. The search for Saru. And why I wanted to talk about Saru is because we're trying to catch up on Discovery a little bit before we get into season 3, and just kind of do some flyover of the first couple of seasons. And I call it the search for Saru because, we are in this conversation, I think, going to be kind of searching for who Saru is and what he means. But also, I think Saru's story is his search for himself. So that's where we're going.
So, and I just wanted to throw something in there real quick. I don't know how much of what you're about to go over you have kind of planned and outlined, or if you're just going to kind of meander. But one of the things that Beth pointed out to me that she liked about Saru was his dramatic shift. And as it relates to people who say, this is who I am, I can't change.
Mm-hmm.
And just how he goes from being prey to predator. Now, there's a biological reason
It's a
for that.
biological shift, yeah.
But
And that's
just that whole concept of a personality being written in stone.
yeah. That's true. That's really true. And I mean, I think there are parts of ourselves that, and that's part of life, is kind of figuring out what those things are that are our core.
Mm-hmm.
And on the one hand, some of the time you'll hear that from somebody, and they're talking about something that is the core of who they are. That is, like I'm always going to be analytical, and I'm always going to be probably equally emotional.
Right.
Right. but that's sort of a neutral quality, right? I would say, well, I'm selfish. That's why education in virtues is so important. Getting a concept of what virtues are. And I say often on the show that all goodness is God's goodness, all truth is God's truth, all beauty is God's beauty. But the other side of that is that not everything that claims to be goodness is good. Not everything that claims to be truth is true. Not everything that claims to be beauty is beautiful.
And not everything that claims to be free or freedom is freedom.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And so, yeah, that's something you have to, there's you can't say that broadly, and say, well, it's always this way or it's always that way. And that's
only
where
a Sith deals in absolutes. Sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, right. That's where Saru's story is. Saru is trying to find his identity, he's trying to find himself, and his culture is telling him, you can't ask questions. Like, not only are we not going to answer your questions, you can't ask them.
Mm-hmm.
You can't be seeking for something outside of the way things are.
Gee, that sounds familiar.
Yeah. The balance must be maintained. And, and that's supposed to bring fulfillment, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's supposed to be because someone else tells you this should fulfill you. This is how you should be because this is what's going to fulfill you. Whatever you think is going to fulfill you is just a fantasy. This is what's really going to fulfill you. And that thing itself is the fantasy. That thing itself is what actually is holding you back and keeping you from becoming who you are. And I speak particularly of this with some care and some knowledge and some love, because I know I've talked this week with a friend who came out of a very strong fundamentalist Christian, I use air quotes, Christian background, and they really relate to Saru a lot.
Huh.
They're like, that's very much my reality. That's very much my story. We talked about the fact that Saru's story is about a principle that I think about quite a lot, that I write about a lot, and that is the idea that our responses to things in life, and the sort of the lead that we follow, and this can help us sort out what is good and true and beautiful, what is freeing and what isn't. Is this core of that there are kind of two threads in life. two roads we can follow, two cores we can have: fear and love. And when we find ourselves operating in and being ruled by fear, we're not in the right place. When we find ourselves operating and being ruled by love, we are. You can still be afraid of something. You can still be scared, right?
Mm-hmm.
But love is that courage, to do the right thing because it's the right thing, even though you're afraid. To be yourself, even though you're afraid. And Saru's journey really follows that path. His whole species is based around fear. Fear of the fear of death, and being prey,
Mm-hmm.
and also that sense of self-sacrifice, but not in a good way, not in a noble way.
Mm-hmm.
A self-sacrifice that is imposed on people, for someone to say, hey, it's your duty to come and give your life for this, whereas Jesus says, nobody takes my life from me, but I lay it down freely. And so Saru is trying to push past that fear. Fear is what keeps his people from asking questions. Fear is what keeps his people in place and in check. And the Baul know this, right? The fear is what keeps the Baul in control of the Kelpians and using them for their purposes. And so that's why they bring them to the cleansing, to maintain the great balance, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the idea is that this is a symbiotic relationship, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
we'll go mad after Vaharai, and we will not survive. We will not be able to survive peacefully if we go through Vaharai without being killed.
Mm-hmm.
So we're helping the Baul because we're their prey, and they're helping us because we get to maintain a peaceful life without going nuts through Vaharai.
Right.
And without having to experience Vaharai, the fullness of it, which is all a lie.
Right.
I don't know if the Baul will actually eat them or not. I don't know if it's important, but the important thing is that the Baul, again, are functioning out of fear, and they're
Mm-hmm.
projecting that fear forward, and they're keeping the Kelpians in fear. But Saru thinks that there's a possibility that they can actually live truly symbiotically. We were talking earlier about functioning on a lie, right?
Mm-hmm.
But Saru thinks we can actually admit the truth about ourselves to one another, and we can find peace through that, rather than maintaining a lie that makes one race the slave of the other. And really, it's a lie that the Kelpians, I think he would say that it's a lie that the Kelpians have to be predators too. And the interesting thing for me is, I think the moment when Saru, relating back to Lower Decks, I feel like Saru is such a rule follower at the beginning of the series, right?
Mm-hmm.
And when he
And
comes,
that's a fear reaction.
that's a fear reaction, exactly. And when he takes command, he's like doing all this assiduous research on all these captains, right?
Mm-hmm.
Who are the great captains in Starfleet, and what are their best qualities, right? And do I have those qualities, and can I really lead? And he's not looking in himself for what he brings to the table as Saru, because he doesn't really know himself,
Mm-hmm.
because he functions out of fear. And so that rule keeping, right, is really kind of an armor that he builds around himself to try to protect himself, right? That's
Mm-hmm.
it, like you say, it's a fear response, and that does not that can't hold together. That doesn't function well. He has to know who he is, and he has to be grounded in that, and he has to bring that to the table and not worry about what other captains do, but rather say, what is my goal as a captain, and how am I, Saru, going to get us there? How am I going to take the responsibility that I have to take as a captain and use my gifting and my skills and my knowledge and my experience to make those things happen? And he never takes ownership of that as long as he lives in fear. But when he's going through the Vaharai and he doesn't have the Baul to harvest him, right?
Mm-hmm.
He wants Michael to do it. And that, first of all, is such an act of trust and vulnerability. He's I don't remember if he's completely naked. Is he naked in that
No,
scene?
no, just from
No,
the waist up.
just the waist up. But still, I mean, he's exposed, right?
Hmm.
And his ganglia fall off,
Yeah.
right? Before she can cut them off and kill him, right? They fall off in her hand, and she's like, "I didn't do it. I don't know what's going on." And he survives. But in that scene, that's the first time he says to Michael, "I love you." Like he and Michael admit, yeah, I mean, they admit, you know how we, in a lot of
Hmm.
relationships, we don't actually say what we really mean. Again, sort of that shielding ourselves, I guess, from being vulnerable and being
Hmm.
honest. And that's when they actually tell each other they love each other. And I think that is the moment of turning in Saru. And it's as those ganglia fall away, and as he realizes that he loves Michael. I mean, admits, to himself and to Michael that he loves her. That's moving from fear to love. And the rest of
Right.
Saru's story is all about growing into that confidence of knowing who he is, right?
Hmm.
And moving in love, not moving in fear. And then by the end of the series, we see him grounded. We see him truly confident, not stuck up and arrogant because he's following all the rules, but confident because he knows that he can trust his crew and that he can trust himself. And he doesn't have to be afraid. Um, and that I think that's beautiful. I think that's absolutely beautiful. And I think Saru, there's a question at the end of season 2, that really you have two potential captains here. It could be Saru and it could be Michael. And Pike talks about, I think Pike talks about Saru being a possibility, and Saru kind of says, well, Michael could be captain too, basically. And I don't know, do you have a preference as to how that goes?
Um, I think I kind of want to see Saru in the captain's chair.
See, I do too. I really want to see Captain Saru. I
But I mean, at the
really
same
do.
time, so I want to see Michael in the captain's chair, but I feel like that's going to be the end of the series.
Yeah, maybe so. Yeah,
That's her, and now we move on to the next stage of the adventure.
yeah, maybe so.
Maybe. I don't
It's going to be interesting to see how that
know.
unfolds. I don't know. But so it was interesting to me that my friend talked about Saru's journey, reflecting their journey out of um, strict religion, out of fundamentalism.
Mm-hmm.
I've talked before, and I talk about it in the book, about the religion that Gene really despised, and the religion that he mostly saw, that he believed probably made up the majority of organized religion anyway. Was religion that stultifies, religion that kills the soul, religion that crushes the spirit, religion that works against the flourishing of humanity. And I see so many people, and I run into them a lot doing the work that I do with Star Trek, with the Gospel according to Star Trek. I run into people, and I recognize in them that they live in this form of Christianity. And I'm not trying to insult them or say anything negative about them or anything like that. I don't mean to um, I don't mean to disparage them in any way. This is just their experience that I see from the outside. I see that they live in a form of Christianity that I see them as victims of their religion.
Mm-hmm.
That whatever Christianity it is that they follow has got them working for their salvation, has got them so afraid of constantly needing to do the right thing,
Mm-hmm.
learning, what's the rule about this? What's the rule about this? If there's a verse in the Bible about this, is there a verse in the Bible about that?
Mm-hmm.
You know, instead of having core principles and core values and then just figuring out how to apply those because you have a brain in your head and life experience and there's not an easy Christian answer for everything. There's not an easy Bible answer for everything. And you have to go on that journey. I feel like they're so held down by a system that says you've always got to do the right thing in all these ways, and you've always got to be, a rule follower. And I feel like Saru's journey from like following the rules in this really fearful sense to having confidence in himself. Paul tells us that we're no longer prisoners to the law, right? That we're free from the curse of the law, he even says. And I think Saru's story really demonstrates what the curse of the law looks like. It looks like a system that tells you don't ask questions. It looks like a system that tells you should be happy with whatever is given to you, and you shouldn't be curious, and you shouldn't seek, fulfillment and all that. That kills the soul. And it's interesting that my friend talked about it in those terms, because that was very much kind of how I was seeing it. But Saru kind of has a conversion. I mean, he has one later when the ganglia fall off and all of that, and he converts from fear to love. But he's on that journey. He talks about at the beginning of the short trek, The Brightest Star. My people look up at the stars and they see fear, right? But I've always looked up in the stars and I've had hope. And again, that fear and love, and that there's something good out there to reach for, right? So he reaches out in faith in that episode, and it's not a religious conversion that he has, right? It's actually kind of a conversion away from religion, if you will, or away from a particular kind of religion. But it's no less a conversion of the soul. It's no less a restoring, a renewing of the soul, a renewing of the spirit that happens to him. Giorgio comes out of the sky. She's not a supernatural being. She's not an angel, right? We talked in the Pikes Peak episode about the idea that, an alien could be indistinguishable from God for someone who's never seen one before, that sort of thing. There is, we know that there's a practical reality going on there. We know that she's in a warp capable vessel, and we know that she's bringing down this shuttlecraft, to come and get him and all that. We know those things are happening. We know about Starfleet. We know it's just a human being. But why can't that also be sacred? Because it is sacred. He does not have a religious conversion right there, as it were. He's not converted to a religion. Maybe he's converted from a religion, but his heart is changed, right? His soul is transformed. And, like I was talking about earlier in the episode with therapy, we should be looking for the renewal of our minds and the renewal of our hearts and our souls wherever we can find it. It doesn't have to be in the walls of a church, because God is literally everywhere. And I just see his process in that moment, in that episode, and he's still searching, right? He's still on the road, in U2 fashion. He still hasn't found what he's looking for. And so when he goes on the planet, I've forgotten the name of the episode, but when he goes on the planet where there are the little microscopic beings, right, that make him happy and make him want to stay, which is really a recapitulation of the original series episode, This Side of Paradise, which I talk about in the book. And it's very much the same experience that Spock has. Spock, for the first time, is happy on Omicron Theta, and he wants to stay there, but it's because of the spores, and it's not genuine, and it's not who he really is. It's not his truest, best self. It's a false happiness. It's a false paradise.
He's afraid of losing it too.
Yes, absolutely.
His actions are driven out of fear.
Yes, and you notice when he goes and he's ready to kill Michael to stay there, he'll do anything to stay there, and that's not the actions of somebody who's found peace. That's the actions of an addict who wants to hang on to their drug. Weird. I was just like in a room with a television on earlier today. and I heard Deepak Chopra and they were asking him like how to find peace of mind. And he said, okay, well, first of all, peace of mind is an oxymoron. The mind is never at peace. It's always working. And I thought, boy, that's pretty good. I mean, I didn't hear the rest of what he said, but that's pretty good. And so there's got to be, that it's Pavo. It's on Pavo that he has that experience.
Yes.
With the Pavans, and that experience, can feel peaceful, but it wasn't real peace because he wasn't discovering himself. He was changing himself. He was being changed. He was being overtaken by a false reality again, and it's kind of a similar sort of opiate, if you will, to the stories that the Kelpians hold on to that make them think that the great balance is this beautiful thing that they're a part of, that's their place in the universe. It's the same kind of lie that the Pavans tell him. And this is the lie of false paradises. And this is the lie of false freedom. When people tell you, you can't go outside the circle. You can't ask questions. Like I was just quoting from Deepak Chopra. There are a lot of Christians who would say, no. You can't quote Deepak Chopra. This is a Christian podcast. Look, all truth is God's truth. Okay. I may agree with Deepak Chopra on some things. I may disagree with him on some things. I don't know. I haven't really read him that much. But that doesn't mean, he's incapable of observing things that are real and true. And so if I've got a worldview that's telling me that I've got to push down my humanity, if I've got a worldview that's telling me that I can't ask questions, if I've got a worldview that's telling me that that everything has to go according to this script, that my life has to fit this script, then I don't think that's right, because God is bigger than a script. And the universe shows that flourishing happens in both orderly and chaotic fashion at the same time, and that there's an openness to growth. And when Saru embraces that, when he's no longer afraid of what comes next, when he's no longer shielding himself by holding on to the rules to protect himself from whatever may come, like prey, right? He realizes life isn't out to eat him. Then he can really come into his own and be a real person. Saru inspires the heck out of me. I love him. I think he's one of the great characters in Star Trek. I look at Deep Space Nine. I look at Discovery. I was thinking about this recently, that even if you hated everything about Discovery, the characters that Discovery has introduced into Star Trek are immeasurably valuable. And Saru is one of them, maybe chief among them. He's a great character. I love him. What else have we got to say about Saru, Tim?
Well, so on a lighter note, I observed, I love Doug Jones, and I love everything he brings to the character and all the mannerisms and everything. I observed, however, one time that apparently he's decided that as Saru walks, he waves his hands behind him.
Yes.
And it looked to me like he was waving a fart away. So now every time he goes walking like that, I can't help but think that Saru just passed a little dilithium off gas or something,
You mean an ion trail?
Yeah, that's what I was looking for. Ion trail. Thank you. Yeah.
Keeping it classy, Tim. This is why I have you around.
Hey, someone's got to bring the levity.
Oh boy. Well, I don't know. Thanks for that.
See if that gets cut out in post too.
Whew. Well,
everything I have to offer is just.
Well, and I've got to say, I love Doug Jones as well. I'm a huge fan of his. I think he's amazing. Of course, I first fell in love with him in Hellboy, playing Abe Sapien. He was just magical in that role, and even though all his lines were dubbed.
Really? Oh, that
Yeah.
makes sense.
No, they brought David Hyde Pierce in to be the voice of Abe Sapien for Hellboy, which he played perfectly, you know. But then in the animated Hellboy movies, the little animated things, Doug Jones did the voice of Abe Sapien. And then when they did the second movie, Hellboy 2: The Golden Army, Doug Jones used his own voice, and you just about can't tell it's not David Hyde Pierce. I don't know why they did the David Hyde Pierce thing to begin with.
You know, it does remind me though, you know how like when Saru is speaking,
yeah,
his lines aren't dubbed, right?
Right.
You can tell that the prosthetics is affecting his voice a little bit because it's a little bit nasally, a little bit closed off.
There's a little bit of lisp and things. Yes. Mm-hmm.
When he is doing a voiceover, there's 1 or 2 episodes where he does some voiceover, you know, some narration.
Mm-hmm.
You can tell that he's not wearing the prosthetics for the voiceover because that his voice quality is a little better there.
Oh, that's interesting. I never noticed that. That's pretty cool. You know, Doug Jones, I mean, helped develop the character and helped develop the Kelpians as a species, much the way Leonard Nimoy helped develop the Vulcans. But you know, what's amazing to me about Doug is not only is he one of those actors who works amazingly well in prosthetics and signs up for that on a regular basis.
Yeah.
Especially with the Saru makeup. I mean, it's just incredible how much latex he's under. But you know, if you've ever seen Saru's hooves,
yes,
you know, like Doug Jones was like, yeah, let's do that. I want to cram my feet into that for 18 hours a day because I'm just cool like that. Yeah, Doug Jones is amazing.
He's a hoss. He's a trooper.
He is absolutely.
But yeah, no, to go take it back to the serious side a little bit. I just wanted to throw out there that I hadn't, like, our discussion actually brought me into a more deeper appreciation for Saru. I always just thought he was kind of cool, but I didn't really know why. But I think I can see a lot of myself and how I respond to fear in Saru before the Valhara.
Valhara.
Valhara. Yeah. So yeah, I can relate.
Yeah. Well, and I can too. And I think a lot of people can, you know, a lot of growth in our lives is shedding some of the things that we've thought gave us strength, but instead actually held us back.
Well, and not just that, and not just from the religious point of view. I just mean like, you know, social situations.
Yes.
And how you think people expect you to act.
Yes. And there's Boimler again, you know, who's like, he wants to be whoever you want him to be because you're in charge. Right. And I just personally, as a leader, I don't want that. Right. Like, I don't want somebody to come up to me and just be like, and just not bring me anything. Right. If you're going to be on my team, I want you on my team because of the talents and the insight and the interest you have. Right. That's, you know, it's not just, I don't want to be in an echo chamber. And I think most good leaders don't want to be in an echo chamber. And anytime you're in a place where you can be that obsequious and people want to keep you around, you're probably under some bad leadership.
You know, it occurs to me that also from the other side is a fear response. I think if you want that level of obsequiousness or if you want that echo chamber, it's because you're afraid of what a dissenting point of view or what the truth might mean to your worldview.
And having control over everything like that. And it's the same thing we talked about too with the forgiveness, with asking forgiveness and forgiving, right? Admitting when you're wrong and then letting go and forgiving somebody even when you don't want to. It's a way that we have power over people. It's a way we have control over things that hurt us or that we're afraid will hurt us. by hanging on to that pain or hanging on to that fear, hanging on to that hurt, and not moving forward, not letting go. So yeah, boy, I think that's kind of the theme of the episode, isn't it?
Yeah. And no time to get into it, but now it makes me want to revisit Star Trek V with that whole concept of suffering and
I
fear.
need my pain. We will talk
Yeah.
about that. Definitely. We will talk about that at some point in the podcast. We're going to get to that kind of stuff. Absolutely. And that's one of the things that I always want to do here. And I appreciate you saying what you did about our conversation, because I think a lot of us who like Star Trek, at least those of us who are Christians and those of us who aren't, I hope whoever's listening, I think this can help you think about why you love Star Trek, and in general, why you love the things you love. And that's a super important thing for us to figure out in life.
Mhm.
Why we're attracted to what we're attracted to, why we love the things we love. And then we can ask questions about how healthy those motivations are and order our loves, as my mentor would love for me to say, to begin to orient ourselves toward those things that really are good, that really are true, that really are beautiful, not just the things that claim to be, and to be able to see through those lies that try to hold us down and see the things that really do bring us into flourishing, because that's where the truth and the beauty of God really are. So there you have it.
All right, very good. That was
Awesome.
That was informative. I
was
enjoyed
fun.
that. Do we have a question from our listeners?
We have a question, and my dear sir, I must say that this question is specifically asked to both you and me.
All right.
So, and I think we're meant to really give separate answers to this.
Okay, so I can't check out for this part then.
No, and I know you're, I know you're probably disappointed. All right, so this question, and yeah, I know you like to check out, but you're not going to.
I'm not gonna check
kidding,
out.
You don't really check out. Where is it? Okay, listener question. All right, so this one is for both of us.
Right.
Which series, and I guess you're gonna have to read this the way you read it, but which series had the most religious impact on you, and which Star Trek episodes had the biggest impact? They don't all have to be the same series, and of course, you can talk about why. But what would you say to that?
Which series had the biggest religious impact?
Yeah, the most religious impact, and I think they're kind of asking, like, where did you most encounter God in Star Trek, or where did you most find, I guess, spiritual significance in Star Trek? Like, what episodes or what series, what part of Star Trek,
Yeah, it's a good question. I think I'm gonna have to go with Deep Space Nine, just because I'm a simple person, and it helps when it's out there in front of me and right there and obvious. So a lot of the religious back and forth that was with the Bajorans and the wormhole aliens and the even the Cardassian almost religion. I think that's the most thought-provoking for me, I guess I should say. None of the series has really made me by themselves has really made me has brought me to a mountaintop or anything like that. It's just Deep Space Nine, I think, brings the whole topic of religion and science meshing more to the forefront of my brain, my frontal cortex.
okay.
As far as episodes go, I think and I'm not sure whether or not you'd call them episodes, but once I started reading and hearing all that you had to say about Star Trek 2, 3, and 4, those really became some profound films for me, in terms of just seeing God and feeling his presence and really starting to grasp that God is everywhere. There's that Sunday school understanding that God is everywhere, and then there's that experience that God is everywhere. And I think just seeing how beautifully it fit, kind of like the golden mean, the golden ratio, just kind of how it fit there, and then you start seeing it elsewhere too. And I don't just mean like the Christ moment where the actor in the film stretches out his arms and dies for someone. I mean, like, just being aware of that. I think that's the most profound influence that Star Trek has had on me from an episode from a spiritual perspective.
Well, it means a heck of a lot for me to hear you say that. That warms my heart. Thank you. I mean, not that I'm responsible for that part of Star Trek, but that, that my experience with that I was able to share that experience, and that helped you. I mean, that means a ton to me. But also, I think you're right. I mean, Deep Space Nine does put it in the forefront. I am struck by the way the question is asked, the most religious impact. I parse words a lot.
Yeah.
and so, religion, I feel like,
yeah, right. None of these like really affected my religion. I'm still Methodist. I still take communion, and none of this has really made, if anything, I think some of the ritual in Deep Space Nine has given me an appreciation for some of my ritual a bit more.
And that's a beautiful thing. I love that, because especially as a person who, like, my spiritual experience, or my growth, I guess, as a Christian, a lot of it has come from questioning religion, questioning religious institutions, questioning denominations, questioning religious politics, and what even churches are and why they function the way they do, all that sort of stuff, right? That has really helped me to grow. And it's been hard, but it's helped me to grow a lot. And so again, but I had a conversation. I was able to interview years ago, John Michael Talbot, who, if you don't know, I'm the #1 selling Catholic musician of all time. He's, and he said to me that, like, spirituality and religion are like two wings of a bird. And you don't fly without both of them. And spirituality may be what you think about God, or how you want to connect with God and all that, but religion is what you do about it. Spirituality has to do with your beliefs, has to do with your soul, the condition of your soul, but religion is how you do it. And so religion for me is defined pretty broadly, because I think our religion is broader than just what we do inside a church building. It has to be. And I think in a very real sense, Star Trek has become a real big part of my religion personally, because it's how I've been working out my faith. It's one of the ways I've been working out my faith, working out the questions of what's real and what I believe and what matters, and how I form my soul, or how God does the work of forming my soul, how I submit to that. Star Trek has been a way that I've done that. So it's really hard for me to narrow it down. It is easy to go with like you said, the Spock as a Christ figure in Star Trek 2, 3, and 4. Certainly, I think there were profound moments in my discovery of that. There were profound moments where I felt like God was just literally saying, "Hey, I'm here. Hey, I'm real." In ways that I did not expect and that I was not looking for. When something about the gospel would slap me upside the head, like in Star Trek 4, when I didn't even expect Spock to be Jesus, and suddenly he was. Or the thing that I start out, and the date that Star Trek 2 starts on, and that whole thing. Those were the experience of doing that research was actually a profound spiritual experience for me. A pastor reviewed my book once, and he said, this book, essentially is like, takes itself too seriously. He's like, Star Trek doesn't take itself too seriously, but this book does, basically. And he says, this is an earnest book, in all caps, earnest. And I wrote back to him, and I'm like, well, I mean, these are my earnestly held beliefs. Like, this, I earnestly believe in what I'm writing. And that's why it's earnest, because this means a lot to me. And I'm not kidding. I'm not joking around. But I think if I had the book to write over again, one of the things that I would want to do is not get too caught up in religion proper, not get too caught up in gods and God figures, not get too caught up in scriptural references, because I think maybe the core of the book, maybe the best chapter in the book, or maybe my favorite chapter anyway, is a chapter called Last Battlefields and Neighbor Love. And in that chapter, I'm talking about how Star Trek discusses what it means to be human and what makes us human, and how we become better humans, and about how the concept of neighbor love, of loving our neighbor, is so at the core of Star Trek. And in that, I find that I can find so much spiritual truth. I can find so much of God's goodness and God's beauty in Star Trek, when it's not talking about religion at all, when it's not talking about God directly or God images or any of that at all specifically, when it's just being Star Trek and talking about what it means to be human. And the thing that I say all the time is that if the gospel really is the satisfaction of everything that we long for as human beings, then when we speak deeply about what it means to be human, we ought to find ourselves bumping up against the gospel.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we do that in Star Trek all the time. And, and I just, so for me, I guess to answer that question is, yes, there are those profound religious, if you will, air quotes, experiences where I feel like I kind of encountered something that was telling me that God was real when I was looking at things like Spock as a Christ figure. But at the same time, I see that too in so many things in Star Trek that I couldn't even hardly pin it down, because it's a cumulative effect in so many ways. And the reason that Star Trek is more than just entertainment, and I've talked about this with many people, that we have this passion for Star Trek, and one of the reasons it's more than entertainment is because of the kinds of stories that it's built to tell. And as long as we keep telling those kinds of stories, we keep making good Star Trek. And it doesn't matter, like, all the corporate stuff that goes on around it is just stuff, as long as those core ideas are still there. And I think that's a sacred thing. And so I feel like that's almost a wiggling out of the question a little bit. But it's hard to say. I mean, I know the original crew films are a lot of what gave me my real love and my real passion for the beauty of Star Trek, because of the way they're photographed, because of the music, because of the way they move, as cinema. They connected with me profoundly, that there's something here. There's something grander here. We talked about that shuttlecraft scene in this episode of Lower Decks, and it's making fun of the shuttlecraft scene in the motion picture and Star Trek 2 and all that stuff. Mm-hmm. But that is a great moment. That is a huge, profound moment in Star Trek. Because it's one of those moments that says there's something bigger underneath all this. This ship isn't just a ship. There are ideas here. and that's what makes it so beautiful. So, all right, Tim, what's going on next week?
Next week, we are going to cover the season finale of Lower Decks, and we will take our final look at the first 2 seasons of Discovery as we prepare for season 3.
Awesome. Fantastic. I hope everybody will join us. In the meantime, please like, share, rate, comment, and subscribe. And if you're on YouTube, be sure to ring the bell. Also, send us your questions. We had so much fun with the question this week, and we want to keep them coming. So Gospel According to Star Trek on Twitter and Facebook, or gospeltrekpodcast@gmail.com. We'd love to discuss your question on the show, and I promise if we don't get to it right away, we will get to it. We want to try to cover all the ones we get. Tim, do you have anything else to say to the folks at home?
Well, you were talking about virtue earlier in the episode, and you were on a roll, so I didn't really want to disrupt that. But I would just like to point out that patience is a virtue that carries a lot of weight.
Ah, that's beautiful. Sometimes that's wonderful. Thank you, Tim, for that pearl of wisdom, as always. That's going to wrap it up for this edition of the Gospel According to Star Trek podcast. Thank you so much for being here. Until next time.
I'm Tim Van Orden.
And I'm Kevin Sinise. And as Jesus said in John 10:10, live long and prosper.
See you next time.